The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Thank you, everybody, for attending HookLogic's monthly webinar series. This month, our topic is how showrooming is changing the ways dealers sell cars. Before we introduce our speaker, I want to briefly give you a background on HookLogic and the AutoHook suite of solutions. When dealers and OEMs ask what HookLogic does in automotive, the easy answer is that we're not a lead provider, but instead we're a show provider. In reality, we do a lot more. Not only do we identify the highest intent to buy customers from your website and third-party leads, we drive over 30% of them into your showroom. It's almost double the national rate of 17%. And we have built the ultimate attribution engine. This means we can track the customer through the lead, the showroom visit, and purchase, and deliver a cost per sale that is best in industry. Thousands of dealers use our products every day, and HookLogic has driven over 600,000 redemptions for their customers. The HookLogic suite of solutions includes Web2Show, our website conversion tool, and Lead2Show, our post-lead product that uses actual data and targeted filters to drive the highest intent buyers into your showroom. HookLogic is proud to partner with a number of the best names in the automotive industry, including Dealer.com, RL Polk, Contact at Once, and CallSource. HookLogic also services a number of the OEMs, such as Chrysler, General Motors, Kia, Subaru, and others in the auto industry. And HookLogic was one of the first vendors in automotive to adopt responsive technology. So this allows your customers to be engaged no matter what device they're using. So our presenter today is David Metter. David leads the automotive team for HookLogic. The AutoHook products were developed during David's tenure as Chief Marketing Officer of a large dealer group, Mile One Automotive. And prior to that, David led the sales organizations for Autobase, one of the leading CRM companies in the industry. He's also sold, managed, and been a GM at the dealership level. So at this time, I'm going to pass the presentation over to David. So David, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Ani, and thanks for the great introduction. I'm excited to go through our webinar topic today on how showrooming is changing the way that dealers sell cars. And it was interesting, as I was putting this together, I was really thinking about naming the webinar Showroom for Dummies, but that would infer that everyone on the webinar series today is a bunch of dummies, and I certainly didn't want to do that. So then I started thinking about maybe just calling it Advanced Showrooming Strategies, and I was fairly certain that I would put somebody to sleep, not just the cute little baby on the screen. And then I go, well, you know, we can go through and call it the 30 minutes of showrooming stats that have no executable answers, and that is certainly not my intent. My goal today is for you to really think through the art of showrooming and how you can walk away with one or two great executable opportunities to use at your dealerships immediately. And so I thought, we'll just call it showrooming. Explain to a bunch of really smart executioners by a dummy. And if you're my age or maybe a little bit older, you certainly get the reference to Fred Sanford over on the right-hand side. So before we jump into some stats and some execution around showrooming, I think it's really important for everyone to know exactly what showrooming is, because I can't take for granted that you would know. And honestly, back in my days, even when I was at Mile One as a Chief Marketing Officer, there were a lot of times where people would come in and they would tell me about something that was going on in the industry, and I quite honestly didn't understand them, but I didn't want to ever admit that I didn't know. So this is great for us to do in a webinar series because you can't see me and I can't see you, and I'm just going to tell you that it is simply the practice of browsing a good at a store and then buying them online. And so let's talk about what that looks like, because it really is the new normal when it comes to somebody purchasing something from a big box retailer. So over the past couple of years, you're seeing people that walk into a big box retailer like a Best Buy, be able to look at a TV, be able to not only see all the ratings of the TV, but the pricing of the TV, and then decide at that moment if they're going to buy where they're standing or if they're going to buy on the device that they're holding in their hand. And it's really become that simple. So simple that you can order things off of Amazon, whether it's a TV or even facial cream, and have it on your doorstep the next day. Even on a Sunday where they're delivering through even traditional, which I think is funny, traditional modes of the U.S. Postal Service. I mean, you can actually see a U.S. Postal Service truck pull up in front of your house delivering Amazon products on Sunday. And so that is really the best example that I could give you as it relates to showrooming. And this visual probably even gives you a better representation because it walks you through exactly what I just talked about. So does Best Buy become kind of a, I don't know, library of information, and then Amazon somehow has stolen their showroom to become the execution for their online purchase? Well, it's definitely becoming the norm. And where you're having the ability to have a storefront right at your fingertips 24 hours a day, and then be able to use some device that sits in your hand to be able to either scan it, snap it, or say it, and be able to get pricing and recommendations on that product. So you go, well, how does that really apply to the car business? Well, I think it really applies to the car business for a couple of different reasons. Number one, if people are willing to do that for a face cream, all the way up to audio-video devices like, a new TV, they're going to do it for a $40,000 automobile. In fact, they're already doing this on your showroom lot right now, because we know that this is a real problem for car dealerships, because 63% of the consumers are using their smartphones while at their dealership lot. Now, 6 out of 10 customers aren't sitting there looking at Facebook or posting pictures on Instagram and tweeting about how wonderful your dealership is. That's not what they're doing. They're looking at competitive inventory, competitive dealerships, and making sure to validate the huge purchase that they're about to make. So let's talk about validation. Here are some of the numbers that I just spewed out. In 2012, in a J.D. Power survey, they looked at the number of customers that were on a mobile device, and then you saw the increase in 2013, almost double. I mean, what's that number going to look like this year? And more importantly, what's it going to look like next year? We already know that, from some of our great partners on the website side, that 40% plus of their total traffic on websites across the board are on mobile devices. But are you ready for that? And do you know how to combat that when that's happening in your dealership? And so some great additional stats to this. I mean, if you see a customer on their mobile phone at your dealership sitting in front of you, again, they're not goofing off. They're probably looking at another dealership. And they're probably going to go to another dealership. In fact, you'll see that the numbers increase greatly when they're looking at that mobile device, that they're going to get up, physically walk out of your store, and go visit another dealership within 24 hours. And what are they doing when they're on their mobile phone at your dealership? Well, the things that you would think that they would be doing. 1 of every 4 of them is looking at your competitors. That means they're on your competitors' websites. So if I'm a Honda dealer, I've got a customer that's sitting in my Honda showroom probably looking at my competitor either at another Honda store or even looking across brands at a Toyota dealership. And then 1 of every 5 of those customers are looking at their inventory. So that means they're looking to see the vehicle and, just as importantly, the price of that vehicle. So what are you going to do about it? The easy thing would be to go with option A. You do nothing. You kind of live in a bubble. And I know that sounds kind of crazy, but if you really think back, if you're a history nut of the car business, we had dealerships doing this back in 2003 and 2004. And really even all the way through to 2008 when the industry really tanked on us, where they weren't jumping into digital, where they were fighting internet lead management and they were fighting digital advertising and they were fighting, kind of relinquishing their advertising spend in those easy traditional modes and doing something that was going to follow where the consumers were going. Well, so we're going to have a group of dealerships that are going to go with this option. They're going to do absolutely nothing. So what does that do for them? Well, the pro is they'll have more money to spend on balloons. I mean, this is an actual dealership, and they probably spent more on their balloons than they did in their digital advertising for the month. And as funny as we think that is, it actually happens more than we'd like to admit in our business. I mean, the con of that is that the same thing that happened to dealerships in 2008 when they closed down, this market share is going to leave you. So if you're not set up for success in mobile display of your site, your inventory, and everything else, and more importantly, how you're going to combat showrooming, this type of thing could potentially happen to you. So option B, I think, is the better option. Better option is to seize the day, to go out and figure out how to execute and have a plan to be able to go after those showrooming opportunities. So the first piece is, let's think about what we can execute. We know for sure in order for us to do anything, we have to figure out how to render perfectly across multiple screens. And there's been a lot of talk about this over the last year about responsive or adaptive. Quite frankly, I'm not going to put my money on one or the other. We chose personally to go with the responsive route, but do something. Make sure that you're either responsive or you can adapt in these types of situations. Because if you're not in the game to be able to display properly on the smallest of screens, then you're not going to be in a showrooming conversation. End of story. Now, I've heard some dealerships say, well, I just don't even want to be. If I'm not there, it's not going to hurt me. So if I don't render perfectly, maybe I even turn off my lead forms, turn off my mobile sites, that'll fix the problem. Okay, that's what dealerships said again in 2008, and those dealerships are no longer in business. So really make sure that you are in the game. The second piece, and I think arguably one of the best ones, is think about how you communicate with those customers. And more importantly, how they currently communicate with everyone else. Not you at the car dealership, but with their friends, their family, people that they are interacting with on a daily basis. If you do not have the ability to communicate in a mobile setting, you're not going to be able to combat showrooming and really the mobile aspect of our business moving forward. I think that companies that have been progressive around this, like Contact at Once, in their mobile chat and texting feature is perfect. And if I were back in the dealership world, that's the very first thing that I would do once I had my responsive or adaptive sites in place. Again, this gives you the ability to communicate quickly and efficiently with that consumer on their terms. More importantly, it gives you immediacy and also allows you to have it in a centralized deposit where all that data is, instead of having one rogue internet salesperson in the corner with it on their device. This gives you the ability to have constant follow-up. Another execution step, number 3 in my list, is think about mobile advertising. So we think about advertising where we do, on the traditional side in TV, radio, and maybe even some newsprint, and in the digital side where we do display, retargeting, all of those pieces. The same thing has to happen in mobile. You have to be able to be seen. And so these are just different opportunities or examples from a Tier 1 example to the left where the mapping is, all the way through to an offer base or lacing in incentives or payments, kind of getting down into the funnel, all the way down to even dynamic distance to the dealership. And there are some companies out there that are doing a good job. One of the companies that I would recommend is Verve Mobile. It's V-E-R-V-E Mobile, where they have inventory that can be geo-fenced. And really what that means is think about where your location is and draw circles around your location. You want to target very specific consumers in specific markets to drive them into your store. Geo-fencing or geo-targeting, that's the definition of that. So this gives you the ability to have a little bit different and farther reach in that mobile environment, driving them exactly to where you want them, either to your mobile site to convert or into your showroom where the ultimate conversion happens. And then I'll give you our perspective on showrooming, where we believe that we fit in the last mile. We want to make sure that we give the customer a reason to get out of the seat at that competitive dealership and drive them into our car dealership seat. And so what I mean by that is if we can get a consumer that's looking at your website, you're our customer, and get them to come from a competitive dealership where they're looking at your site and drive them in because the stats say that that happens, then we think that we're in a good place. So I'll tell you what we've done. We work with thousands and thousands of different dealerships that are on our platform and a number of different OEM opportunities. And so let's say that we're doing something for GM or our GM dealers. We could map out all the competitive dealerships to our GM dealers. We've mapped out over 19,000 dealerships in our user interface and their lat-long location, which means we know exactly where they are, not in an area of where they are, but exactly where they are in our mapping solution. This gives us the ability to work with our partner, whether it's the OEM or the individual dealership, and identify what competitive dealerships we want to target. And so what this means is that if we circle the competitive Ford, Toyota, or Mazda dealerships, we can then display on our customer site, in this case, as an example, Peterson Chevrolet Buick Cadillac. And in that case, if that customer is at a competitive Ford store, a Toyota store, or a Mazda store, then we will display an opportunity within that site, in this case a banner ad at the bottom, that incentivizes that consumer to get up and to drive into our dealership. And we can change dynamically that dollar amount or that offer to coincide with the campaign that we're running. And so we even changed the delivery method in which we will provide that incentive to the consumer, because we know that they're not going to fill out a traditional lead form. Consumers won't do that. But they will give us a cell phone number and they will give us an email address. So those are the delivery methods. And what's really cool is that we're integrating into products like mobile texting and mobile chat so that instantly, once that consumer fills that out and the delivery method is text, we'll be able to integrate the conversation real time with the dealership in which we serve or the OEM partner in which we serve. And then that information can be pushed into Passbook. We have directions to the dealership or just call the dealership. And so we push those consumers right into the Chevy store that we serve. Gives us the ability to do something that's completely unique in the industry as it relates to showrooming. So let me walk you through that one more time. Consumer pulls up in the dealership, our site. So they're at a competitive dealership. They look at our inventory off of our dealer site, and we engage them and they see the test drive offer. Then that consumer can receive the test drive offer in a coupon on their mobile device, getting them to drive into our dealership with a 30-second redemption process. And for the dealers that are on our solutions that are on the webinar, you know how easy that is. And then that consumer information goes into our user interface and matches up with the attribution reporting that we do with IHS powered by Polk. Gives us the ability to measure accurately exactly how that consumer came into your dealership once they purchased the car. And that's why we have the attribution model. And so as a review, very simple review, you have to make sure that you render perfectly in a mobile environment. If you're not doing that currently, make it happen today. And most of the major website providers have the ability to do this right now. But after that step, which you may have already taken, make sure that you can communicate effectively with your customers. And that's going to be in a mobile texting or a mobile chat environment. Has to be. It's not going to be email back and forth. The only other piece would be calling, and in most cases, if they're in a competitive showroom, they're not going to take the call. So the mobile texting and mobile chat give you an unfair advantage in that arena. And then have some type of opportunity to convert that consumer into your showroom, and most importantly, to be able to attribute it specific to that mobile opportunity and that mobile competitive showrooming opportunity. Because our placements are specific, we can track each one of those individually. And then have great reporting that's going to validate all of that, not just in ours, but in everything that you do. Because you can be emotional, you just have to back it up with great data. Whether you have to report back to a manager or to a general manager, to an owner, or even to an OEM partner. This gives you the ability to say, look, we are successful or not successful based on the path in which we've taken. And attribution data can certainly do that for you. And so my hope today is that you've gotten great execution opportunities. You know exactly what showrooming is and how it's going to affect you, not just today, but down the road. And you'll get a chance to jump out in front of your competition and be ready to execute, whether it's residing perfectly on a mobile site, communicating with your customer, or executing an opportunity to drive them out of competitive showrooms and right into yours. And with that, I thank you for attending today's webinar, and I look forward to seeing you next month on our next webinar series.